Now for the last look. In recent weeks, two high-profile figures in two notoriously shadowy political capitals have gone missing, and their disappearances speak volumes about their respective countries. I'll start with the case of the missing Chinese foreign minister, Qin Gang, whose case I mentioned at the top of the show. He was last seen publicly in a slate of meetings on June 25th. This week it was announced that Qin was removed from his post as foreign minister. Ministry of Foreign Affairs websites were then scrubbed of any mention of him. Beijing is thick with rumors about him. Qin's disappearance and removal is all the more astounding considering that he was the protege of Xi Jinping, handpicked as the US ambassador 2 years ago. He then catapulted over more experienced leaders to become the youngest foreign minister of China in 70 years. Whatever happened to him, this episode highlights the opacity of the Chinese political system. Senior officials often disappear from view with little, if any, public explanation. Presumably, some of the secrecy in this case is due to the fact that Qin was close to Xi Jinping, and any investigation into him would reflect poorly on President Xi's judgment. But if Qin had become the victim of his political rivals, then it's a shame. As The Economist notes, Qin was clever and surprisingly candid with diplomats. He spent years studying the United States. He was capable of charming foreign dignitaries, diffusing tensions, and holding firm to the Communist Party line. These are skills Xi Jinping ought to value, and certainly not ones that all of Qin's rivals possess. Now that brings me to the case of the other missing person in another country known for the murkiness of its domestic politics. I'm speaking of General Sergei Surovikin of Russia, who was last seen in a hostage-style video last month as the Wagner Group's Yevgeny Prigozhin and his troops marched on Moscow. In the video, Surovikin, wearing fatigues but stripped of all insignia, pled awkwardly with Prigozhin to abandon the coup. The awkwardness perhaps indicates coercion. Surovikin was close to Yevgeny Prigozhin, who has called him a man who is not afraid of responsibility. US intelligence officials told the New York Times that Surovikin had advanced knowledge of the attempted coup. The Times also reported that Surovikin was believed to be detained under questioning late last month. Though it's easy to see why General Surovikin could make President Putin uneasy, this is actually a disappearance that is bad for Putin and his immediate objective, winning the war in Ukraine. Surovikin earned the nickname General Armageddon from his time in command of Russian forces in Syria. His tactics are brutal and abhorrent, but considering Putin's aims, they are effective. He is known as a dangerously competent military leader. In October, Putin appointed Surovikin head of the Russian forces in Ukraine. He promptly withdrew from Kherson, built up Russia's defensive positions, and stepped up attacks on Ukraine's power plants. Now, to be very clear, I'm not praising the man or the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but these were clear-eyed, tough decisions given the Kremlin wanted an aggressive offensive. And for these efforts, he was demoted in favor of General Valery Gerasimov, who spearheaded an ineffective winter offensive that cost Russian forces dearly. Now, Surovikin is missing, and Gerasimov continues to run the Ukraine effort. As Dara Masakov writes in the New York Times, the current defense minister and Gerasimov, both of whom are willing to tell Putin only what he wants to hear, will continue to conduct the war in an inept fashion. For the sake of familiarity, the Kremlin has chosen to reinforce failure. It's the nature of a closed political system that yes men and political operators win out over competence every time. These twin events in China and Russia remind us of the virtues of an open and democratic political system, despite all its messiness. You know, we often despair at the tumult of democracies. Look at British politics over the last few years, with its revolving door of prime ministers and constant leaks, resignations, and recriminations. We cringe at the volatility of Trump's cabinet, his abrupt, much publicized dismissals of his generals and other staff, their attacks on him. It all seems undignified, like a soap opera unraveling before our eyes. But on the whole, it's a good thing. It is open politics, openly engaged in. There is no mystery as to why Boris Johnson had to resign. No one claims that Rex Tillerson left the State Department because he got ill. In democracies, we wash our dirty laundry in public. And the events in China and Russia in recent weeks show us that perhaps that laundry system is a key ingredient of democracy's resilience. Thanks to all of you for being part of my program this week. I will see you next week.